Public Relations. Edward L. Bernays. 1945. Narrated by Skeptical Waves. Part 2. Public Relations in Action. 20. Salesmanship and the Public Relations Approach. Hidden Markets in the Human Personality. Salesmanship is one of the basic factors of our economic system and a characteristic aspect of American life. Today, the old-time drummer and traveling peddler have been replaced by trained retail clerks, house-to-house canvassers, manufacturers' representatives selling to jobbers and retailers, and sales executives, many of them vice presidents of huge corporations. The methods and traditions of American salesmanship have spread from business to other fields of activity. Efforts to make use of modern sales techniques and to transform them into tools of mass persuasion are made daily by insurance companies, banks, investment houses, public utilities, organized charities, political parties, schools, churches, and other organizations. American salesmanship has aided our mass production system. Basically, salesmanship still follows principles established more than half a century ago. Obviously, however, we can strive for sales goals only with some understanding of human nature. To arouse interest in people, we must know what people are really like, what really arouses their interest. In a talk before national sales executives, an organization of top company officers in the field, I suggested that by taking advantage of the new knowledge of man and society is now being developed by America's 30,000 social scientists, our sales executives, distribution system, and business in general could open the hidden markets in the human personality. The following chapter develops this idea and makes some specific recommendations for carrying it out in practice. The United States leads the world in the many varied aspects of direct selling. We have developed selling techniques brilliant in their effectiveness, without counterpart in any other country. In the many years in which I have been practicing public relations, I have, however, been struck by one basic lack in the prevailing approaches in American distribution: the neglect of our hidden markets in the human personality. This is our most important unexplored market, and public relations can make specific recommendations on how to sell in that market. Selling is moving a product from producer to consumer. The word consumer is a convenient abstract word, of course, but it is only an abstraction. We sell goods to people. We attempt to persuade men and women, human beings, to buy our goods or services. To do this successfully, we must have the clearest idea of how people function. And to understand people, we must know not only how the body works, but why we think and feel as we do. Here our whole personality comes into play. Our family background, our childhood experiences, our culture pattern enter into the decisions we make at the counter. All kinds of pressures, subconscious and unconscious, condition our actions. These invisible factors of human personality must be brought to light and understood if we are really going to deal with our markets effectively. Nobody ever saw the laws of physics. These laws are invisible, they are mental concepts. But without understanding them, we would not have radios, automobiles, or airplanes. The atom bomb that exploded over Hiroshima was also the result of factors and dimensions nobody ever saw, but which Einstein and other scientists apprehended in a physics formula. So, too, with our unseen personality factors, and it is they that really control our conduct. The decision of the customer to buy or not to buy takes place in this invisible realm of his personality. Assuming this, we can approach our customers in three ways. First, we may intensify an existing favorable attitude. Second, we may negate an unfavorable attitude. And third, we may convert a passive attitude into an active one. Note that all three approaches deal with attitudes, with reactions of the human personality. These approaches must be based on a realistic understanding of human nature and conduct. Unfortunately, a good deal of salesmanship today is still based on an antiquated 18th century notion. Our fathers sincerely believed in the myth that when it comes to business, everybody can be neatly pigeonholed as the economic man, with the tidy additional qualification of a few instincts: sex, self-preservation, and desire for food, shelter, clothing. But we know from everyday experience, and science knows more fully from patient investigation and experiment, that there is no such creature. The human personality is far too complex to be pinned down to any simple formula. It is infinitely more complex than market research reveals. The human personality has inner and social needs of many kinds. We all have hidden urges to which we respond: anxieties, insecurities, inferiorities, resentments, which play a part in our desire to buy. Though they are hidden, they can be charted. We have neglected most of them in appealing to numbers of people. We appeal to sex, or to a desire for status, of course, but a person's approval is more involved than that. Market research, for instance, usually reveals only the chronological age of customers. But people have 4 other ages as well: mental, physical, emotional, and societal. And these ages do not always match up in one individual. We should know in broad terms all the ages of our publics. The nature of many people, for instance, makes it possible to sell them toy railroad trains and comics, even though they are adults. The ordinary survey may give us the wrong reasons why people act as they do. The answers they give are rationalizations, they are a cover-up. The consumer's inferiorities and his desire to compensate for them may affect our sales, as in the case of show-off merchandise. People do not make decisions, including the vital one of buying goods, solely on the basis of advertisements, facts, logic, or so-called instincts. Here is an example of how human personality affected the sales of a great chain store. People refused to buy its goods, we found out, because the company did not recognize a union, it did not observe an 8-hour day, the goods came from certain countries, and the customers did not like the nationality or the politics of the store managers. This is a simple illustration of what I mean when I say that people are people and not abstractions. Their decision not to buy at that chain store was determined by hidden factors in human makeup which had nothing to do with economics. The sales executive must face, understand, and be guided by these factors. Here is another example of how business ignores the workings of the human personality. Pick up a Negro newspaper in Harlem and read the advertisements. These ads are trying to sell goods to Negro consumers, yet most of them are illustrated with pictures of white men and women. Has it ever occurred to the companies that run those ads to study the feelings of their Negro customers toward whites? Or the effect of those advertisements on the consumers? A sales manager of a condensed milk company suggested a label for a can to be sold in India. He wanted the label to carry a picture that looked like Elsie the cow. Fortunately, it was pointed out that the cow is a sacred animal in India. Of course, every sales manager uses psychological, social, and cultural approaches in his sales. But they are often conventional and intuitive approaches, not based on scientific knowledge. For instance, an advertisement shows a beautiful girl wearing a girdle. The assumption of the sales manager is that women will identify themselves with this beautiful girl and therefore buy that girdle. But is this the actual reaction of women to that advertisement? A scientific investigation might show that women are unconsciously jealous if the poster girl is prettier than they. The advertisement might create an unconscious sales resistance instead of encouraging sales. Some years ago we made a study of customer reactions to leather shoes and soles. We found that leather-soled shoes were bought in greater quantity by more middle-class adults who had been poor as children than by other groups of adults. The reason was that as children their torn soles were a sign of inferior social status. When they became adult and well-to-do, they compensated for their sense of social inferiority in childhood by buying more shoes than they needed. They bought extra shoes, not because they needed them to wear, but for psychological reasons. A psychological need is invisible, it is hidden in the personality. But it is a very real need, and it has a powerful effect on the market. To understand hidden markets in the human personality, the attitude poll or so-called market research is not enough. To find out why we behave as we do, we must go to the social scientists. They have analyzed and broken down much of our conduct into such concepts as rationalization, projection, sublimation, and compensation. Because formulation of the laws of the physical sciences dates back more than 150 years, and because their results from the steamship to the atom bomb are so spectacular, we are all aware of their importance. The social sciences are only half a century old, but their findings are already of the utmost importance. It would be to our advantage to make greater use of them in our sales efforts. The psychologists are discovering more and more about how the mind works. The sociologists are giving us greater and greater insight into the way various social groups function. The social psychologists have an expert knowledge of how groups react as distinguished from the way individuals react. The political economists have investigated and tested the way economic and political groups act and react under varying circumstances. All these social scientists, working in universities, in field expeditions, and through their nationwide scientific organizations, are making studies and findings of the utmost importance to business. Yet many businessmen, scarcely aware that they exist, fail to take advantage of their knowledge. However, Professor John W. Riley Jr., of Rutgers University, recently reported that budget-conscious business interests spent some $27 million in 1948 in putting social science methods to work, an increase of $17 million over 1938. Business applied this sum to market research, production, personnel relations, purchasing, financing, and consumer preference. In 1948, social science service cost the government $52 million, or 3 times its cost in 1938. And in 1949 the military establishment spent $7 million for social science studies in human resources, personnel selection, morale factors, leadership, fatigue, and so on. Social science was also employed in the war. Figures prove that the social sciences are an important part of American business. But from the standpoint of selling, we have only scratched the surface. Here is an example of the kind of scientific finding about the human personality and American society that is vital to us if we are to make more effective use of the hidden markets. It is the Manual for the Study of Food Habits, a report of the Committee of Food Habits of the National Research Council, a division of the National Academy of Sciences. This committee was composed of top-flight social scientists. Its executive secretary was the eminent anthropologist Margaret Mead. One section of this report is of special interest to sales executives. It shows general and regional attitudes toward food in the United States. It shows how nutritional theories influence social change, what the cultural classifications of food are, how food is a symbol, its cultural basis, how the attitude of parents influences food preferences, the role of utensils and cooking habits in food preferences, and so on. These scientists studied food from the standpoint of psychology, psychiatry, sociology, and home economics. They found that certain foods become associated with low social status and are therefore rejected. Other foods, like white bread, sugar, and meat, become symbols of high social status. They give us a scientific picture of the standards that determine party foods, like turkey, birthday cake, and ice cream, and how parents, by praise and punishment and example, fix a child's food habits. In some places children prefer ice cream to spinach, but in Cedar Rapids, for example, they think green vegetables and fruit juice are swell, while candy, cake, ice cream, and hot dogs are terrible. The manual tells us what effect previous experience has on the selection of food. Under what circumstances can preferences be altered? In what way do social and emotional conditions influence attitudes toward food? What techniques have been developed to study food and taste preferences? And finally, what techniques have been used to change food choices? Obviously, unless we know the answers, we cannot sell foods really efficiently. Food is not merely a thing to be sold. It is a whole configuration of things scientists have studied. The results of their study are available to everybody. And what is true of food is equally true of other commodities, of automobiles, nylons, vacuum cleaners, of flour for apple pie and flowers for the table. The social scientists have investigated the personality of the American in relation to many products, and what they have not studied, they are equipped to study, given the opportunity. The important thing for the field of distribution is to take advantage of the knowledge and skills of our social scientists in order to integrate this field even more fully with the dynamics of American society. Every segment of American society can advance itself along the road of greater efficiency and higher status by planning. I believe that a long-term plan of integrating distribution with the social sciences would give business a most powerful instrument for using creatively the hidden markets in the human personality. I know this is easier said than done. I also know how much we can do once we set our minds to it. Therefore, I suggest the following 4-point program by which American business might take advantage of the techniques and findings of the social sciences. 1. Add a leading educator to the company's board of directors, someone like the dean of a leading school of business administration. This would give the company continuous, direct contact with the scientific groups engaged in studying our society. 2. Then go to specific fields of education and add to the board of directors one or more social scientists, a great sociologist like Professor Robert McIlver of Columbia University, who knows more about groups and group functions than anyone else I know of, or a prominent psychologist like Professor Gardner Murphy of the College of the City of New York. Men like these would give business direct working contact with the social sciences and the men and women who are making studies of specific interest to business. 3. Executives should also apply their energy to integrating salesmanship with the social sciences by building and keeping up to date a social science library in the office. The books, magazines, brochures, and bibliographies published by various universities, scientific bodies, and individual scientists would give executives and their staffs valuable knowledge which they could use for their own practical purposes. 4. To facilitate this work, it would be useful to assign one or more staff members to read, analyze, and digest the social science publications that come to the office, and prepare reports on developments, so that executives could conveniently keep informed of developments in the field. At the level of statistics, market research, and attitude polling, American business already avails itself of the social scientists' findings, with considerable profit to itself and the country. The sales executives of America can now take this process a step further and tap the hidden markets in the human personality by integrating their sales techniques with the discoveries which our 30,000 social scientists have made and are making about man and society.